Episode 162, Overcoming an Addiction to Prescription Drugs with Becky Garner.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with a coach? Here we go.
Addiction, especially drug addiction, is not a subject we speak of much on this podcast. But Coach Becky Garner is here today sharing her journey and story of being addicted to prescription medication. This is such a powerful episode and one filled with so much hope if you or someone you love is in a very similar situation. Becky not only shares her story, but shares how coaching was the thing that finally helped her get sober. We can think of no better endorsement for coaching than this one. Please listen to Becky's story and see where what she learned can apply in your life. Whether you struggle with a similar situation or not, there's something for everyone in today's episode. Enjoy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. I start to feel very repetitive because I say that every single time. I've got to come up with something different to say. But I am joined today by Coach Becky Garner. Hey, Becky.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. A little nervous. It's fun though.
I am super happy to have you here with me, especially this topic that we're going to talk about today is one that we haven't really addressed on the podcast yet. Yeah. And so I'm excited for people to get to listen and hear this. But before we get started, will you just tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Becky Garner. I'm a master certified coach, which is so fun to say. I don't know why that's so fun to say. It is, right?
Yeah. It's work, right? Like that shows a lot of work that you've put in.
Yes.
So
it is so much work and I loved every bit of it, but it was a lot. It was a lot of work, but I just finished it up from the life coach school in, oh my gosh, it was May is when I finished with my master certification. So that was really fun. But I consider myself a general life coach. So I work with whoever wants to come in on issues in their life. But I find that the people that are the most drawn to me are people who are like me, people who have just had like a lifetime of anxiety and depression and struggle. And they've kind of like tried all the different things, all the different modalities. Usually by the time people get to me, they've been to therapy, they've tried like maybe more alternative methods, and they just haven't found anything that really helps them like feel better. And like the most common thing I usually hear is I'm stuck and I can't get unstuck, or I have been told that like this will never go away. And so that's usually kind of when they end up in my world. And that's who I love to work with as well. I'm like, if you like are thinking I can't change, I'm like, come to my world. I will help you.
Because you can.
That's my favorite.
Isn't it interesting that coaching is sometimes like the last ditch effort? Like I want to say, don't let it be the last ditch effort. Yes. Like let it be the first thing, because anyway, but I think that's what it takes sometimes for people to be like, okay, I guess I'll try this life coaching thing.
Oh, it's what it took for me. So just searching around for those right tools. But yeah, that's who I love to work with. I would say that I am like obsessed with human development. So that's kind of my world. I love neuroscience. My dad said when I was little, like 3 or 4, I was always like asking him about my brain. So he's a medical doctor. And I was like, oh, my brain does this. And how does my brain work? And how does my brain do this? And he thought I was going to grow up and be a neurosurgeon, but instead I'm a life coach and I love it.
Hey, they're both very important things, right? One heals the brain like physically, and the other one heals it in an emotional and spiritual way, but
and physically as well.
Physical,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
We can change those brain structures. So
yep, for sure. So okay, you work with people who have anxiety and depression, and obviously it sounds like this is something you've dealt with yourself. Can you give us a little bit of background on your health issues and where it has led you?
Yeah. So you want the dirt? You want all the good?
Well, I always like the dirt, and I think the listeners like the dirt. So yeah.
Yeah, we can go into it. No, I love sharing the dirt because I think it's so important to share like what we've been through
Yeah,
so
it's
that
real.
it's real. Other people can see it and normalize it, right?
Yeah.
So I would say like I came to this world probably with just a lot of anxiety. Like I watched my children, and my children were just born with more anxiety than I see in like other children, right?
Okay.
And I think I was like that. Like I was the kid who would like throw up if my parents left me with the babysitter. Like my parents left me with my sister one time for Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving, and I remember throwing up and like crying and being like, "Don't leave me." Like I just felt very like anxious, and like in class I was like I couldn't turn the pages in my book because I would have like heart palpitations and like sweat going and stuff like that. So anxiety was very like prevalent in my life. I wouldn't have named it that, but I knew that I felt a little off and like a little scared all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then depression for me really started around like the age of 11, 12. And a lot of people that come in and see me, like especially females, they tell me it's about 11 or 12 is when I started noticing like I'm kind of depressed. I'm a little different. I remember watching my friends like run around and they're like having fun. And I was sitting on the couch, like thinking about death and dark poetry and little emo before emo was a thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I started into an eating disorder at about 11, 12, same age there. Just like my body, I got so tall and I got my woman body like early. And I wanted to just like be small and be like my friends again. So I got into like starving and watching my weight. And it just got like worse and worse from there. So just more depression, more anxiety, more eating disorder. By the time I was like 16, I was really into like more self-harm kind of stuff. The eating disorder was getting pretty bad. I had a couple, I don't want to say light suicide attempts because that's not ever light.
Yeah.
But they were like more like nobody really knew about them.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I got to college, it was really, really bad. Like I was in about a semester of college and I just stopped getting out of bed. Like I slept all day. I slept all night. I would go 2 weeks without showering because I was just like picking up my arm was so hard. It felt like horrible to just get up and like try and move my body at all. I had completely like just kind of stopped eating at that point. Yeah, it just got really dark and really bad. And I had a couple of suicide attempts that ended me up in ICU, which was really fun for me and my family.
Yeah. Scary for your
Yeah,
parents.
scary for my parents. Very scary for my parents. And then when I was 19, I went to the Center for Change in Provo, Utah for an eating disorder. So I spent about 3 months there. And by the time I got there, I was just so sick and tired of being sick and tired. That was kind of like my thing. I'm like, I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like I wanted to either get out of this world or get better because the way I was living in it was not working at all. So I really just put in a lot of work at that point, just went full into the Center for Change. I went and got a bachelor's degree in family and human development. I started working in residential treatment once I was far enough along that, I was doing much better. I worked with eating disorders. I worked with teenagers that were in residential treatment. And then I ended up at the University of Utah's Neuropsychiatric Institute as a staff member, not as a client. Just clarify that.
Yeah.
We did that part too, but but I ended up working there in a program called KidStar with kids who were like 5 to 12 years old, and just really just dove into like the mental health field. And I found that for me, like therapy was really helpful, but the self-help books were like where I made so much of my own progress, was just like reading those books and kind of treating myself and listening to like my own body and my own intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So by the time I was 26, I'd say I was like fully recovered from my eating disorder, which was amazing because I was told that I would probably never fully recover. They're like, you'll probably have this the rest of your life. And I'm just like rebellious enough that I was like, nope, watch me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm getting over this. I did like, you could not pay me like $1 million to ever go back. There's no level of money or anything that would make me go back. So then I had like a really awesome year. And I was even like getting ready to buy my motorcycle. My husband was into motorcycles. We were like, I was running a lot. It was really great. And then I had a back injury after that. And this is where my life kind of took another major turn. So those first like 13, 14 years are like depression, anxiety,
Yeah.
eating disorder. And then at this point, I was like, I'd say at 26 was the first time I could say, like, I actually want to live. Like, I remember that moment being like, okay, I choose life. I choose to stay here. And anyway, I was at the psych unit working with the kiddos, and we were playing a game called noodle hockey. You take these little water noodles and you hit a ball, and it's all fun. And I just twisted wrong, and something kind of went wrong in my back. And long story short, I ended up in the emergency room, and I had herniated 2 discs in my back.
Jeez.
Which was super fun as well.
Yeah. Painful.
Yes, very, very painful.
Yeah.
And I remember the nurse coming in at that point, and she said, what kind of a pain pill do you take? Do you take Lortab? Do you take Tylenol 3? Those were kind of the options. It was like 2006. And I said, don't give me either. I just tend to like pain pills. Like, I already knew at that point that I was the person that like looked forward to getting my wisdom teeth out because I would get to take pain pills.
Okay. Interesting.
Right. Like, I kind of
Interesting
was
that
like,
you knew that you were onto that. Yeah.
I was onto that. Like, when I was like 16, 17, I was like, I like these a little too much. This is kind of weird. So I told her not to give me any. And she came back about 20 minutes later and said, hey, there's this new medication. It's called Percocet. It's non-addictive. It's really effective for pain. Do you want to try it? So, sure. It's not addictive. Let's do it. And so she gave that to me. And like 20 minutes later, that was it for me. That was
Really?
like, yeah, it was just like a cocoon of love and gratitude. Like, I just remember all the pain in my body went away, but so did all the depression, all the anxiety. Like, I was suddenly open to love. I didn't realize before that I'd been so closed off to like people loving me and me sharing my love. And suddenly, like, I could tell my husband I loved him, and I loved the nurse, and I loved the doctor, and I was so grateful to all the people. And it was just this cocoon of like warmth. And I would have never known that that was actually the euphoria from the medicine. I just thought I was very grateful for all the help they were giving me. Right.
Yeah.
And then I'd say by the end of that week, when I was starting to run low on the bottle, I was like starting to hit a panic. Like, I need to keep this. I need to have this in my life. I need to, keep having it. And I was still physically, like, I'd herniated 2 discs. It's going to take a while to heal. Right. But I was recognizing that, like, I don't want to be without this medication. Like, I told my husband, I was like, this is the most effective antidepressant I have ever had in my life. That's what it felt like. Like a really effective antidepressant.
I would never have thought of it as having any sort of effect other than the relief of pain. So it's so interesting to hear you talk about that and share that.
Yeah. And it's different for people because my husband can take it and he gets irritable and mean. And we're like, nope, you can't have Percocet. Like, do not take that. He had a shoulder surgery, and like 3 days into it, I was like, no more for you, because you are just not a nice person.
Yeah.
But for me, I would get energy, and I was loving and accepting and open and grateful. It was just like, I felt like myself. I was like, oh, there I am. I've been missing for all these years.
Right.
Yeah. So I spent like the next 7 months, like on the floor. My husband made me a little bed because I could barely crawl. He had to kind of help me go to the bathroom, like all the things get dressed. And we were just kind of waiting on surgery to see if that was going to be a thing. And so I just kept taking the pills because they were helping me with the physical pain. But in my head, like, I knew that like emotionally something was going on. Like, I liked him too much. And I remember my doctor about 3 weeks in, he said, hey, if you continue taking these, you're going to get addicted. And I remember my first thought was like, too late. Like, that happened a while ago, really within that first week for me. And most doctors, when I talk to them, they say, oh, it takes a full 30 days to get addicted, like physically dependent, where your body is dependent. But for me, the emotional addiction was so quick, so fast. And I would even say, like, I've talked to people who have been on it for about a week, and physically they're like, no, I felt weird coming off. Like, I felt unsettled and a little like itchy. So I don't know if we'll get like different research around that at some point, but it was very different for me than the way I hear like medical doctors describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that is really interesting.
So yeah. So I was just going to say, in the beginning, it was very like, I was very cautious and slow with it, right? Your brain starts to get tolerant. So if you continue to take it, like it'll continue to help with the pain, but that if you do get that euphoria feeling, that will start to level out. Your brain's like, oh no, okay, we get tolerant to that. Different things happen with like our dopamine receptors and the way they work, they become less sensitive to all that dopamine that's coming in, right? And so then you go to take a pill and you're like, well, that didn't work. And so you think, well, I'll just take another one. And I remember the first time I did it, I thought like, I don't think I had a pill. Like, I'm pretty sure I didn't take that because I can't feel it. And they'll warn you, they're like, don't do that. Right. But if you're addicted already emotionally to that, like euphoria, I was like, well, of course I'm going to just take the next pill. Right.
Right.
And then 2 becomes not enough. And then 3 becomes not enough. And then 4 becomes not enough. And I just started going up and up and up on the medication till, I think like at my worst, like it was like 20 pills at a time. Wow. Like enough to like kill a person who's not an addict, for sure.
And so at what point did you realized it all along, but at what point did you say like, this is too much. Like I need to be done with this?
Yeah. So I would say the first, like, that's a good question. Cause like the whole time the back of your head's going, I need to be done with this. Something's wrong. But your brain is like driving you towards it all the time. The first several years, it was kind of like I was on, I was off, I was on, I was off. I had the back surgery, and then the scar tissue actually wrapped around my sciatic nerve and attached to it. So the problem that we were trying to correct actually became like permanent for me. And then the other thing that happens when you get herniated disc is you get what's called degenerative disc disease, which just means like your back just starts to like domino, right? So there was several years in there where I would just like sneeze and I would herniate a disc. I would reach for like my car keys and herniate a disc. I would get out of bed and like fall on my face because my leg would be numb. So it was easy to just continue justifying like taking the pills. And I would start to take more and then I would back off and then like take a little bit more and then I would back off. And it was kind of all over the place. But I would say it was probably 7 or 8 years in before I was like, I've got a problem.
And how long were you taking pills? Like that was 7 or 8 years in. How long until you like were done
like
with
the
them?
total? Oh,
yeah,
sure. 14 years. It was
14 years.
14 years. Yeah. Yeah. 7, I would say like half of it, the first half, it was just kind of like going with it. I felt very justified in like having the medicine, and it wasn't too like, I don't know, my brain just was like, this is fine.
Right.
And then some point in there, I was like, I'm going to die. Like halfway through it, I recognized that it was a major problem, but that took time
for sure.
to recognize, to like admit it to myself.
Was your coming off of them, was that something you were able to do on your own? How did you do that? How did you find help for that?
So I was off and on many times, and I did it by myself every single time except for one time.
Okay.
When I went and got help. So in the beginning, like when you're going through with like withdrawals is what we're talking about, right? So your body becomes like physically dependent on the medication. You actually get a dependence on the opioid to function in your body. And your body's like amazing because it's adaptable and it's flexible and you're, it's adjusting to what you're putting into it. And as it does that, I just kind of want to define like what a withdrawal is a little bit before we talk about it, right?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So your blood pressure increases, your blood sugar increases, all your stress hormones increase. Like everything is just like so high and out of whack. And you can't tell at all that it's all out of whack because you're taking the opioid, right? And the opioid, what it does is it dulls the pain. But what it really does is it just gives you so much dopamine that you just feel like everything is right with the world. Like that feeling that I got of just like, oh my gosh, love and gratitude and warmth and this little cocoon I could curl up inside of myself. So I felt very, very pleasant. But on the inside, my body was in absolute chaos. So when you go off the medication, suddenly you start to feel all of that chaos up that your body is in. So like for an example, I was working out at the gym and my trainer was like, I think you need to go get a cortisol stress test. let's just go see what your cortisol levels are at. So he had me do a little test, and my cortisol test came back as like, it said, this is the cortisol level of somebody who is in a war-torn country, who is going through severe like PTSD or is in starvation. And that's what was happening on the inside of my body.
Yeah,
and on the outside, I was like, let's go to the PTA meeting. Like, I'm teaching music to children. I teach primary. Like, felt fine because I had the medication. So as long as you have the medication, you don't feel all of those effects, right?
Okay.
Makes sense?
Yes, total.
Yeah. And then you go off of them, and then your body goes into withdrawal. So first of all, you have like the withdrawal of not having the opioid anymore. And then your body's got to heal from those elevated stress levels, blood pressure, blood sugar, all of the things that are going on. And I would say in the very beginning, withdrawal, like, is very, very sneaky. Like, it's hard to notice. So when I first went through it, I would have never known that that's what it was. Okay. So the first time I ran out of meds and just didn't have another bottle, it felt like I was just a little more anxious than normal, like a little more depressed, a little more unsettled. And my brain was like looking for that pill.
Okay.
Right. So if you're like taking medication and you go off of it and you feel like a little itchy and you keep like thinking about the pill, like, oh, maybe if I took another pill, I'd feel better. That's probably like a good sign that you've become physically dependent. Okay. It doesn't mean you're addicted. It doesn't mean that like life is over and now you're in some like TV show where you can't get off drugs. It just means that like there's been like a little physical dependence that's happened, right? And it's kind of normal. If you take the pill and all of that goes away, then it's like, yeah, that's a good indication that like my body has adjusted and gotten used to this, right? And then I would say like somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, and I would say like withdrawing is a spectrum because it's like those early stages where you just feel a little off. And then somewhere in the middle, I started getting like, you get watery eyes, like a runny nose, excessive yawning, like I would yawn all the time. And like the early stages of withdrawal, extreme irritability, extreme cravings, like you can't stop thinking about the pill, how to get the pill, severe anxiety and depression, like heart palpitations, restlessness, insomnia. I would go sometimes like 2 weeks without sleeping, like not a wink, because your body will start to fall asleep. And the second you do, the cortisol will like shoot you right back up. So you just don't sleep a wink. So you're in like the worst state of your life and you can't, even like my doctors would give me, here's sleeping medication, here's muscle relaxers, they'd give me all the things and I still wouldn't sleep at all. Muscle cramps, right? Major upset stomach. And I'd say the worst part about it is debilitating fear. This is the part that like, because you hear about the withdrawals, right? And if you notice, they sound very equivalent to like heroin, right?
Yes.
Yes, because they're both opioids.
Okay.
So I've talked to heroin addicts and they're like, getting off of heroin was easier than getting off of prescription pain pills for them. Not for everyone, but for some of the ones that I've talked to, right? I remember being freezing under like 4 piles of blankets because I was so cold. I had a panic attack for like 2 weeks during one of my withdrawals. Like I just could not, my heart would not stop. And I was like sobbing hysterically day in, day out, all the time, just nonstop. Let me go back to the debilitating fear. So this is the part that we don't really talk about a lot, but because you don't have access, like your dopamine receptors are kind of dulled. So we're not like absorbing the level of dopamine we normally do. And now we're not getting the medication. So basically like the simple way to put it is like you have no happy chemicals in your body. You can't even accept them. There's not enough there. What are there not getting absorbed? And so it feels like all of the hope and the happiness and the goodness in the world has been completely sucked out. And you are left with nothing but like pure terror and pure fear.
Partly why you were on them in the first place, because that feeling of hope and love was there. So like embraced you. And I could see how you would just like, let's just go right back there.
Let's just go right back.
So good.
Yeah. And it's amazing too. So what really helped me understand what was going on in my brain, because, you describe these withdrawals, right? And you're like, why would you ever do that again? Like if you spent 2 weeks without sleeping and this debilitating fear and anxiety and all this, like, why would you ever take the medication again? And my dad, like I said, he was a doctor. And I remember him telling me like, oh, once you go through withdrawals, like you'll never go through them again. It wasn't true for me. I went through them. I had calculated at one time. It was over 36 times. It was usually about 2 to 3 times a year I would go through these withdrawals, like get on the medication, kind of get stuck on it, start abusing it, and then eventually get off and have to go through withdrawals, you know. So I would go back and back again because every time my back went out, every time I had a herniated disc, every time like that pain came up, I was like Pavlov's dogs. I was like salivating for like this medicine, almost like, let's get injured so I can have it. That's how my brain was working, right? And it sounds so crazy. But one of the things I loved, my doctor that worked with me on addiction, he told me that your prefrontal cortex, right? So the area that makes like your logic and your planning and your good decision making, right? It normally is very helpful. It's normally going to be like, hey, don't take 2 of those pills. That's a bad idea. You could overdose. Don't break into your mother-in-law's house and like steal pills. Don't go doctor shopping. Like it would normally help you, right? But when your brain is addicted and it's being overrun by like the reward pathway that's in there, your prefrontal cortex works against you. Meaning, instead of cautioning you, it actually helps you go get the drug. It starts problem solving for you. It starts going, oh, hey, your neighbor, she mentioned that she has Lortab in the cupboard. You could ask her for some, or you could go over there and just take it. Or you could go do this, or you could go downtown and maybe try some heroin. That'll help. Because if you think about it, your body is physically dependent on that opioid to function, right? Not just like mentally and emotionally, like we've become physically dependent. So your prefrontal cortex is going to solve that problem for you. It's like, we need this to live. So we got to go find it in order to function. And it was so enlightening and helpful for me to understand, because it takes the morality out of it. Like it's no longer a more moral problem or a shameful thing. It's that my brain is actually working against me. My brain is actually driving me towards the addiction.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, totally does. I'm curious, as I listen to you talk about this and the ups and downs, what this was like in your relationships with the people that you loved, and what was the effect on that?
It's a really good question. Most of my relationships had no idea. My husband was the only one for 14 years.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's normally impressive on your part.
It is, because normally when we get addicted, the relationships suffer the most, right?
Right.
But for whatever reason, for me, I was very functional as an addict, kind of like a closet alcoholic, like somebody that is an alcoholic, but you would have no idea. So I, was very involved in my children's life. I was very involved in my marriage. I was, teaching music. I've taught music to children for like 15 years. I was doing the primary chorister, doing my callings, showing up to like the field trips. And I just had to make sure I had my medicine. And this is kind of one of the mistruths about addiction, is people think, once you get on, your relationships get destroyed, your life gets destroyed. But the truth is as long as you have the opioid, as long as you have the medication, you can be very, very functional. Like we have heroin addicts that are like jazz blues musicians, and they're very functional as long as they have the medicine. When you don't have it is when you become, very dysfunctional in that sense, right? So for me, I was very functional because I was able to figure out ways to get it, which, I did engage in like doctor shopping and like stealing and things I would normally never, ever do. It's weird to be like the primary chorister and like planning in your head, like, how am I going to get more medicine? So I would say for me, the biggest effect was my relationship with myself. So my relationship with my husband was very good. He was super supportive. He is the most unconditionally loving person you'll ever meet. I don't know how he does it. Every time I would tell him that I was stuck again, he would just open up his arms and be like, I know. It's okay. We'll figure it out. Like he just hugged me and loved me. He never, not a single time, like lectured me or told me to stop or yelled at me or anything, which was the most loving thing he could have done for me. With my children, it was very good as well, because the medicine made me feel like so good and effective, like I was a playful mom. I was like a fun mom.
Yeah.
As long as I wasn't going through withdrawals. But once again, like that relationship with myself, like that was carrying the secret by myself, being afraid that like my daughter, my 2-year-old would find me like OD'd on the couch someday because I took too much. That's where the real damage occurred for me. For sure.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if the right word to say is impressive or not, but that's like, it's amazing to me that you were able to do that. So I'm curious then, and I kind of asked this question in a different way before, but what was the turning point for you? Like, what was it that made you be like, okay, this is the time. Like I've tried it all these, what did you say, 36 times before?
Yeah.
Like this is it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it was getting kind of maybe like 12 years in or so, and I was just like I was pretty sure this was going to kill me. Like I just could not get off. I had tried so many times. I went to the addiction recovery program that the church offers, which was a lovely, like beautiful program. And I loved it. I started going right when COVID happened and they shut everything down.
Yeah.
I went to therapy. I went to outpatient twice, took my daughter to, for 5 months daily, we would go down to outpatient treatment. So I tried all these different things. So it was never a point where I was like, I have to get off. Like I had been trying to get off most of the time for at least half of it. I'd say the first half, I was just kind of indulging in it and not worried. And then the second half of the addiction, I was like actively like, no, this is going to kill me. I've got to get off. And I tried all these different things, but the turning point really was for me. My sister called me and I had told her about it just a couple months before and opened up, and she said, hey, I've got this thing. I just kind of feel inspired by the Spirit to tell you. And I was like, oh, great. It's one of those things. She said, I've got this thing that's like in my life. It's this life coaching thing. And there's this coach named Jody Moore. And she's just been really helpful in my life. And I just think maybe you should check her out. And I was just like, that's stupid. Like life coaching. Right.
I know it needs another word, right? We need to call it something different.
I love life coaching. It makes sense now to me, but I was like, what is this? Well, when she explained it to me, it just sounded like cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right.
Right. And I was like, I've been doing cognitive behavioral therapy since I was 19 years old. I was in my 40s at the point where she told me this. I was like, there's nothing about cognitive behavioral therapy that you could teach me. I get it. My thoughts cause my feelings. Like I knew all of that. But I just decided like, I'm going to honor my sister and I'm going to listen to a podcast. Right. I hate when I suggested something to people and they just blow it off. So I'm like, I'm going to go listen. And I listened to a podcast on like decision making. And I was like, what is this? This is kind of different. This is new. So then I joined her program, like her monthly program. And I listened to my first coaching call. And I remember being in my raspberry beds and I was like planting raspberries, right? Only like I was literally like staring into space with like my little trowel covered in dirt and like dirt falling in my lap. And I was just like, I sat there for probably an hour just in silence, like sitting in my yard with these raspberries, just completely blown away by what I was hearing. And one of the first calls I listened to was a mom that had a child that was addicted to marijuana and wouldn't stop smoking it. And to hear someone not pathologize it, not make it wrong, not talk about it like it was shameful or bad, and to even encourage the child to like, the child's going to do what the child's going to do because they're an adult child, you focus on you and what you're doing. It just blew my mind. Yeah, that was it. Then that was it for me there. So really? Like, I just nosedived in. And I tell people all the time, like I made more progress in 9 months of coaching than I did in all of my years of, therapy, inpatient, outpatient, all of it. Like it literally saved my life. I have not used once since that moment.
Really?
Yeah.
It was like
cold that was
turkey.
It. Well, so when I started listening, I had been off for 2 months. I had gone through I had been off for 2 months, but my pattern was pretty much like I'd be off for like 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 3 months and go back on.
Okay.
I just never went back on because coaching really like it gave me the tools. Like one was the tool of like being able to like manage your urges, your cravings. Right. So I had a little bit of help there, but really just healing that relationship within myself and developing like the confidence that I could, feel these emotions and not have to act on them. And just all those pieces, like loving and forgiving myself. Like that's the thing I work with my clients so much on, is like not judging ourselves, loving, forgiving ourselves. Like it changes everything in your world.
And I think when we say that, because like coaches say that a lot here in this space, I think it's pretty common for people to be like, yeah, whatever. Like, yeah, that's nice. That's nice of you to say, or that seems like a nice thought.
Yeah.
But it is reality, right? And like, it is reality when we can be kind and loving to ourselves and see our worth that is infinite. We have the capability to do so much more than we can from any other space.
Yeah. I mean, if I wasn't able to get to that point, I wouldn't be able to help all the people that I can help now. Right.
Yeah. So what did you do? Obviously you're not free of pain probably in your life, especially if you're like, how has that been for you? How do you deal with that without using the pain, the pills to cope with that?
Yeah. So it's really similar to the emotion work that we do in coaching. So there's a book that if anybody here is like dealing with chronic pain, there's a book called The Way Out by Alan Gordon, I want to say. It's the best book. I love it so much. He gives a lot of neuroscience around pain. And one of the things he talks about is even though we feel pain in our body, pain is actually generated in our brain. And this is kind of a new discovery. I don't know how many years old it is, maybe like 10 or so, that we're finding that pain, there's like 7 different centers in our brain. Don't quote me on that, but there's several different centers in our brain that create and register pain, right? So our body sends a signal to our brain, and then our brain interprets it as pain. So what happens is something like we break our arm, and then our body sends a signal to our brain. Then our brain's like, oh, you're in pain. It sends it back down so that we know, oh, I should be careful with my arm. Don't move it. Right. And that's why we can break our arm and not notice it for like a minute. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or cut a finger and like not even like register that we've cut a finger, because it takes time for the body to send a signal to the brain, like something's happened here, and the brain to go, oh, it's pain. We need to send pain back down there so this person will take care of it. Right. And what he talks about in the book is that when we get into chronic pain, he's like, when we look at the body is actually functioning and it's doing really well, but the brain has kind of gotten stuck on like, no, there's pain there. It just keeps sending the signal, right? So he teaches that what we want to do is actually teach the brain and the body that we are safe in the pain. And it's just like emotion work, where, like when we resist the pain, we increase the pain. When we resist our emotions go up, right? When I get mad at the pain in my body, I'm frustrated, upset, like, why are you doing this, body? Why me? Your pain actually goes up. And when they look at imaging, those pain centers actually get bigger and bigger and bigger the more we do this. And so when we teach our brain that we're safe in the pain, those pain centers will actually get smaller, and we can decrease our pain. So one of the mantras that I use all the time that he gives in the book is, first you just look at your body and you're just like, this is where I feel the pain. And we describe it to ourselves just like we would with an emotion, right? Very similar.
Yeah.
It's jabby, it's sharp, it's burning, it's in my left hip, right? So I just identify it and find it. And then I just say to myself, like, this is my body sending a signal to my brain. My brain interprets it as pain, and I am safe. I just repeat that over and over. This is my body sending a signal to my brain. My brain interprets it as pain, and I am safe. And just kind of breathe into that, and that pain will just like start to diminish. So that's what I do to manage my pain. I just did it on Saturday. I had a word Christmas party, right? And I had to like lead the primary kids and do different things. And my back was out. It was in a lot of pain. And I just went in the primary room and laid on the floor and put my feet up and said my mantra for about 5 minutes. And then it was so much better. I was ready to go. So.
Wow.
Good book.
It sounds like it. And we will link to it in our show notes. People can find it. We always hear once an addict, always an addict. What's your thought? What's your stance on that?
Yeah, I don't believe it at all. Like, not at all. Like I think I talked about this in the beginning. I was told the same thing with my eating disorder, right? Like, you're going to have this for the rest of your life. I'm just rebellious enough to think that that's not true. Like, nope. Like, brains are plastic. They're meant to change. And really, like, if you believe in eternal progression, then you know you can't get stuck the way you are. Like, I'm not going to leave this earth and go up to heaven and be like, I'm an addict. Like, it's still there. Like,
Right.
I've got this eternal progression, right? But I believe in this earth life as well, that, you know, my brain's plastic. It's meant to change. My body's meant to adapt. One thing to keep in mind is our brain does seem to permanently change when we become addicted. So think about it like if you've ever gone off sugar, right? Like if you did a month without sugar, or you did 6 months without sugar. Like I met one family one time, they did a whole year without sugar. They're like, we're going to do a whole year without sugar. Nobody can have any sugar. And then we get to go to Disneyland. Like that's kind of a common thing that happens right now with some of my students. And then I talked to the family afterwards. They got to have their sugar at Disneyland. And I said, would they, you know, do the kids still eat less sugar? And she's like, oh no, they're just right back. Right. Mm-hmm. We just go right back to it because those pathways in our brain that go dormant when we stop taking it, when we stop eating sugar, or we stop like taking opioids, they're very similar in many ways. Those pathways go dormant, but as soon as we put it back in our body, it's like your brain lights up right where it left off. It doesn't start at the minimal level. It starts right where it left off. And I think some people think like, well, then we got to be like afraid of taking pills again, right? But we don't need to live in fear of that, because like if I were ever like in a car wreck and somebody pumped me full of morphine, it's not like I'm going to wake up and become an addict all over again. Like I have choice, right? I have skills now.
Yeah.
I know how to manage a craving. I know what's going to happen in my body. I know how to manage an urge, right? I know how to like get my own back. I know how to like meet my own needs because of all of this amazing coaching that I've done. And so I just don't think we have to be afraid of like that coming back in. Now, for myself, I don't ever want to take pain pills again. I hope that I don't have to do that. But if I did need to, for some reason, like I'm going to be okay. It's not going to like send me back in. That makes sense?
It totally does.
Yeah.
Totally does. All right. So what advice for people who are listening, and hopefully anybody who's listening who knows, I mean, we probably won't know who needs to hear this, right? Like if we listen to you and we know that you were really good at being able to hide it, like we don't know who needs to hear this message, but what is your advice to people who are struggling with addiction?
Yeah. So one bit of advice, this is more on the practical side, is naloxone. So naloxone is a medication that you can get from your doctor that saves lives. So if you OD and somebody's able to give you naloxone, it will save your life. It blocks the opioid receptors and immediately puts you into withdrawal, and it saves your life. I had a client that OD'd, and she actually totally died. And her neighbor happened to have naloxone, and it saved her life. They were able to give it to her.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you are abusing, if you're taking more than you're supposed to, anything like that, or if you have a child that you suspect is, like, just get some naloxone, keep it in the house. Like the doctors, they don't even ask questions. They're like, here you go, just save a life. You can keep it around for a neighbor. Like you can have that. So that's just a little practical thing.
Okay.
I'd also say that, like, I just really want you to know that there is nothing morally wrong with you, that your brain, it's not functioning in the way that it was designed to. It's not working in the way that it was supposed to. All of these choices, like if you're making choices to steal or to doctor shop or to take more than you were supposed to break into your neighbor's house, all things that people do. Okay. I've met people who are in their 60s and 70s who have done these things. They get stuck on the medication, and just remember that your brain drives you to do this. This is not you. Your brain is functioning in a very, very different way. The other thing I would say is that lies die in the light. It's one of my favorite things. Somebody else who was an addict offered this to me. She just said, lies die in the light. And what that means is when we start talking about our addiction, when we start sharing it, whether it is a prescription pain pill, it's pornography, it's gambling, like we have behavioral addictions, and we have, like medical, like medicine addictions, right? Drug addictions, all of it. When we start talking about it, all the lies, they just start to like fade away. They start to like go away because we can put it into the light and see that. I'm trying to think how to explain this. It's like when we keep it hidden and secret, we're like shrouded in shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
And shame drives us to like hide, shame drives us to like not tell anybody. And I always think of, even though all of us feel shame and it's a normal emotion, like shame is the adversary's tool. And if he can keep us in shame and we don't tell anybody, then he keeps the addiction going, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as we put it in the light and we share it and we find people who are like open to it, open to hearing it, open to loving us in it,
Mm-hmm.
then those lies start to die away.
I love that.
Yeah, it's so good. And for those of you like that are listening, to like, I would never tell anybody, they would hate me. I can't possibly, like, I had all of those thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Every single one of my music teacher, my kids that I work with, all their parents know that I was an addict and I taught their kids. And guess what? They love me. Like, they love me. My family loves me. Like, all of those lies that like people were going to hate me, that this was something horrible, that I couldn't stop, that like I was going to die this way. Once I started talking about it, reaching out, connecting and sharing, that all went away. And I would just say too, that like, love yourself in the addiction, like while you're addicted.
Yeah.
Loving yourself is the way to get out of the addiction. If we wait for a like love afterwards, it doesn't really work, because if we don't care about ourselves while we're in the addiction, there's no reason to get out. Right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So I had to learn how to like love myself while I was using, which is why coaching was so helpful. I couldn't have done that without a coach.
I'm sitting here experiencing a very strange emotion, I have to say, because I'm experiencing like this feeling of pride in you, like as you as my fellow sibling and you know, child of our heavenly parents. Like, I'm feeling this pride in you for your strength and your ability to overcome. Anyway, I just I'm feeling so much admiration. So thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yes.
Yeah.
You're so welcome.
Anyway, Beck, oh gosh, and I've even got a tear coming to my eye. Better wipe that away. Before we leave, Becky, can you please share with people where they can find you?
Yes. So my website is Becky Garner, Garner, like Jennifer Garner, BeckyGarnerCoaching.com. And you can find me on there. Also, there's a link on there to my Facebook. I do a lot of things on my Facebook. So just things for free. People can come and meet me there and chat and hang out and do some Facebook Lives and stuff like that. So
awesome. Thank you so very much. Yeah. I have enjoyed every minute of this and have loved getting to connect with you. So thank you, everybody, for being here and share this, because everybody needs to hear this beautiful message from Becky today. So thanks, have a good one, everybody. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.